First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us today for Art, Activism, and Healing in conversation around female genital cutting. I'm Catherine Cox. I'm a program intern with Sahiyo, and I'm so honored to be joined today by our four panelists, Naomi Wachs, Owanto, Sunera Sadicali, and Andrea Carr, as well as Sahiyo co-founder Maria Taher and program intern Sandra Yu. Across the world, over 3 million women and girls are at risk of female genital cutting. FGC can have severe physical and psychological impacts that last a lifetime. As the painful effects of female genital cutting are increasingly brought into the light, activists and therapists alike are looking for more ways to support survivors and protect future girls from this practice. Art is an underutilized tool to create awareness about this issue and support survivors' healings. During our discussion today, we have our four expert panelists who will help us to shed light on this issue and support survivors' healing. During our discussion, we're going to explore some topics, and we will start today with a quick introduction to the work of our panelists, as well as the work that Sahiyo has done in this field. And after we introduce our panelists' work, then we will have a short Q&A session led by me. And after our formal Q&A session, we will then have time for audience questions. If you would like to ask a question to our panelists live, please submit your question specifically to the Q&A box and make sure that you do not select anonymous. And then we'll allow a few of our participants today to come live and ask our panelists questions. So for those of you who don't know, Sahiyo United Against Female Genital Cutting is a nonprofit organization aimed at empowering communities to abandon FGC. Based in the US and India, our stated mission is to empower Asian and other communities to end female genital cutting and create positive change through dialogue, education, collaboration, and community involvement. We utilize storytelling in a variety of ways, including art, throughout our programming and to support survivors and work within communities. Maria Taher, one of Sahiyo's co-founders, has graciously joined us today to help us explore some of the programs run by Sahiyo. Maria has worked in the field of gender-based violence prevention for over 10 years and is a strong believer in the power of storytelling and its use in inspiring change and supporting healing. Now I'll hand it over to her to talk a little bit about Sahiyo programs.
Thank you so much, Kate. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
So, hi everyone. Again, thank you for joining us. Before we really dive into hearing from our guest speakers, we wanted to share a bit more about Sahiyo's work for those who are not familiar with us, and the few projects that we have done that really use and involve the arts to support survivors and to educate the larger community on the impact of FGMC on girls in their communities. So one of our projects we wanted to really focus on is our Voices to End FGMC project, which is a digital storytelling project that aims to mobilize a critical mass of storytellers and activists from across the globe by bringing together to share and heal from their experiences of female genital cutting, connect and grow as leaders in their own community, and really create short videos calling for an end to this harmful practice in their own voice. We started this project in 2017 and have since created 37 videos. And those who have taken part in this project have really come together to learn how to share their own stories related to FGC. And by the end of the workshop that they take part in, are able to make short videos exploring those stories, as I mentioned. These videos really allow participants to create a safe space to share their stories and to really get, again, control over their own narrative, control around the narrative on the issue. So we're going to share one example of the Voices stories. Some of you might be familiar with this. And the example we're going to show, this particular storyteller was able to work with an artist to depict their story as well. And then in other workshops, our storytellers use their own photos. And one of our guest speakers, Sunera, actually took part in our workshop as well. But this story that you'll see, the storyteller and the artist were able to work together to edit the story in a way that she felt comfortable with. And just so you all know, we're actually currently in the process of a virtual workshop right now in which we have 12 participants. So we will have new stories to share later this year as well. So if we can share that story.
Saya berdiri di tepi jalan, memakai pakaian ringkas, kemeja T dan seluar jeans. Menunggu ayah menjemput saya dari universiti. Kami sedang menuju ke rumah ibu saudara untuk acara ulang tahun sepupu saya Anissa yang berumur 2 tahun. Assalamualaikum, saya ucapkan semasa memasuki kereta. Ibu bapa dan kakak saya membalas, Waalaikumsalam. 20 minit kemudian, kami tiba di rumah ibu saudara. Dan terus terbau aroma masakan rendang, lodeh dan sambal goreng yang enak. Rumahnya penuh berwarna-warni. Daripada baju kurung merah dan biru kepada jubah hijau dan juga abaya hitam. Saya mengambil makanan untuk ibu dan diri saya. Dan kami duduk sambil menikmati makanan lazat. Makcik saya membawa sepupu saya yang comel dan dengan bangganya berkata, dia disunatkan minggu lepas. Mata saya terbeliak. Tulang belakang saya menjadi lurus. Saya hampir terjatuh dari sofa. Dia disunat? Anak perempuan disunat? Saya bertanya. Saya tidak boleh percaya jawapannya. Ya, minggu lalu oleh seorang doktor. Cepat sekali. Snip, dah habis pun, makcik saya menjawab. Tetapi ini melanggar hak kemanusiaannya. Ini salah, saya menjerit. Kakak saya memotong perbualan kami. Dia berkata, kamu juga disunat semasa kamu kecil. Mulut saya digantung terbuka. Itulah saatnya saya sedar tentang sunat perempuan dan saya mendapat tahu ia telah berlaku kepada diri saya. Tetapi, mengapa? Untuk apa? Saya menanya ibu. Ibu menjawab, dalam Islam, perempuan patut disunat. Cara ini lebih bersih. Dan kamu tidak akan berzina. Pada saat itulah, saya memutuskan untuk mencabar mitos-mitos sebegini dan melindungi anak-anak perempuan lain di Singapura. Dan sejak itu, saya telah berkempen untuk menghentikan amalan sunat perempuan.
Great. So that is just one example of how we utilize the arts and storytelling in our work. And if we could just go to the next slide, Kate. So Sahiyo carries out a variety of different social media campaigns as well. And one such campaign we recently hosted during the International 16 Days of Activism from November 25th to December 10th was More Than a Survivor campaign. And at Sahiyo, we really do understand that being a survivor of FGC is just one moment of an individual's life and only one part of who they are as a person. Yet we recognize that oftentimes being labeled as a survivor can prevent people from seeing a person in any other context beyond their survivorship. So this particular photo art campaign, More Than Survivor, explored women's individuality to really help show the world what made each of them unique. And aiming to show different aspects of the person, we created mosaics to represent different moments of an individual's life. Here are just a few examples of More Than the Survivor campaign. Great. And it's on the slide now. And the smaller tiles in each of the mosaic make up each person's portrait that represents the various activities or identity that that person identifies with. And maybe we could, Kate or Sandra, if you're able to quickly find the link to our More Than Survivor campaign blog post on Sahiyo's website, we could share that in the chat box. Then others could look at the mosaics themselves as well. You can also find the mosaics posted on all of our social media if you would like to take a look at all of the 16 that are up. If we could go to the next slide. This is another project that Sahiyo was engaged in that included photography, and it was called Faces for Change. This photo campaign gave voice to the experiences of 8 survivors who lived in India or who currently live in India. And India, for those who are not familiar, is a country where the government has not adequately acknowledged the scale and the existence of FGC, and actually has denied that there is enough evidence to support that FGC is an issue in India. So if we can go to the next slide. This is just an example from that photo campaign. And this particular photo is featuring Fakira Merchant. And she's holding actually another picture of herself as well as a child. We could go to the next one. So the Faces for Change campaign was launched in Mumbai with an exhibition to showcase the photographs. And there was also a panel discussion in which survivors, doctors, religious leaders, and child specialists were able to really highlight and educate the larger community on this issue. The photos you're seeing right now on the slide, this is the gallery where the images were displayed. So these are just a few projects that Sahiyo has been involved in, but we wanted to share them to help highlight that for us, we really believe storytelling in the arts can help build engagement on this issue and can shift cultural norms to ensure that FGC is something that is recognized as harmful within communities. So that is really why we believe in the power of storytelling in art and exactly why we're hosting this webinar today. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it back over to Kate so she can introduce our speakers some more. And also we can hear from them about how they've utilized art in their own advocacy work.
Thank you so much. Just like Maria said, we'll now have the opportunity to hear from our 4 panelists about their work in the field and how they are inspiring change and moving towards healing. So first up, we have Owanto. Owanto is a multicultural Gabonese artist born in Paris, France. She was raised in Libreville, Gabon, and later moved to Europe to study philosophy, literature, and languages. Her multidisciplinary practice emerges from a 30-plus year career where she has explored a variety of media, including photography, sculpture, painting, video, sound installation, and performative work. Owanto, we are so honored to have you here today, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much for having me. I want to first address a thank you to Maria and acknowledging that she's the person who put us on the right track, me and my daughter Katia. When we spoke on the phone in New York, she introduced us to the Baudi Dora community, and we had an interview there. And from that moment, we realized that a part of the photographic elements that I used in order to make people aware of the issue of female genital mutilation, I was going to use another tool, which was a sound installation made of testimony from all over the world. So, Kate, if you would like, I would start with a photograph, which was the start of, yes, this very important photography became important because it was the first one that was selected by an amazing institution in South Africa called the Zuid-Moka Museum of Contemporary Art. And when I discovered small photograph, old photograph, it was 6 years ago. They were analog photographs, they were tiny, and they were representing circumcision. Of course, I called it now female genital mutilation. So when I saw those photographs, my first reaction was to put them back in what I called the forgotten drawer. A few days later, I came back to that drawer and I decided to do completely the opposite. I decided that these images that capture the moment of intimacy of the circumcision or the female genital mutilation was was going to be an imagery that I would use in order to, as I said, to bring light on the issue. So this image was shown at the Zeitmoka during the opening of the museum in 2017. It's the first of a series, and I want to talk about the flower on the image, and I want to talk about as well the fact that from the tiny little analog photograph that I found that belonged to the colonial era, I decided to glue them to 3 meters high. So it is a very monumental size for a photograph, a very unusual size. And the fact as well that I decided to do it, it's printed on a metal surface. So there is kind of a presentation of the harshness of the subject. It's very cold, and the girl is very young, which of course is a subject that is as well what brings us together. She didn't give her consent, and the flower is an invitation to bloom, to just let womanhood bloom. So after the photograph, as I said, when we went to New York to the community to start to do the first testimony, we realized that being a worldwide issue, it was very important to create awareness and to capture voices from all over the world where the female genital mutilation is practiced. So we have now recorded more than 400 voices, so 400 testimonies. And we created with Katia Berger, that Maria knows well, we created the piece called 1000 Voices, which was as well heard in the same museum. They gave us a solo exhibition, and then it was later on exhibited at the Makal Museum of Contemporary Art in Morocco. And there was there in Makal a mix between the 1000 Voices that you could hear and the Pardonne-moi series, which was done more or less in the same time with reform cutters, reform circumcisers from the region of Kolda in South Senegal. So you will see a few images. That is the installation at Makal in Morocco. And 1 month later, there was another exhibition. Oh no, it was not 1 month later, actually, it was on the 6th of February, Madre Museum in Naples, a big institution, showed as well a photography of a girl with a flower. And that is showing how this art and activism was being displayed in different countries, more or less in the same time, or in the same time on the 6th of February. You can see the reformers, they are mending. I would say it's a little bit on a way of atonement. They are, I've asked them to do the embroidery of the voices that were coming through WhatsApp from 36 countries. And I don't know if I said it, but the piece, the sound installation is at the moment of a duration of 3 hours and a half, and it is spoken in 24 languages. And we're still, actually it's an ongoing project, so we will still be at some stage welcoming more voices in order to show the diversity of the practice and how to obviously educate and give the information that are necessary in order to stop the female genital mutilation. There is a light. The light for me, represent the consciousness. It represents a transformation. So the idea in the neon is that the spoken word of FGM survivors are written and they allude to the awakening of consciousness. So it's become brighter. Here it was exhibited at Macal with a neon light. And now we see a neon, it's Aram Ki Boti, and it is evil skin. I think we found out what it means from the word of the survivors that we received through WhatsApp. And it has been provided from a survivor from the Indian community. Here is another neon. I've cried, but only the birds in the air could hear my loud voice. It's Bindu that spoke, and she's from Sierra Leone. Each time that we show the work in the museum, on a wall, as you enter the space, you have all the name of the survivor written in order to validate their testimony. It really represents a big movement for me that I wanted to lead, and with you as well, other activists and other amazing people, in order to change the man's mindset. So I have something I wanted to say again about the school and the change of mindset. How on the February 6th, we will have thousands of students who are going to hear the voices in different schools in Abuja and in other towns or villages of Nigeria. We will have answer probably as well of some people who are going to join the movement on the 6th of February. I probably have forgotten to say a lot. There is so much to say. It's very hard to say it in 5 or 7 minutes. So I don't know, Kate, is it something that you would want to help me? Something I didn't say? Or
No, this was perfect.
Together in a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, and that was perfect. And thank you so much. You've done, I think, so much. We only was able to cover a little bit in our time frame. So I definitely encourage people to look you up and explore on their own. But just for time, I think we'll move on to our next panelist.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sunera Sadicali was born in 1982 in Mozambique and later moved to Lisbon, where she grew up in a family that was part of the Bora community. She later moved to Spain to study medicine at the age of 19 and finished her family medicine residency in Madrid. Since 2015, she has lived and worked in the south of Sweden and is politically active in women's issues, decolonial feminism, anti-racism, and healthcare activism. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Sunera, and I will turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you to you, Kate, and Maria and Sahiyo for all this journey together. I think we are in contact since 3 or 4 years almost. So, and I also want to thank Owanto for her beautiful presentation. I didn't know about her work, so I know. Well, I want to start just saying that I don't have a formal education on arts. I'm a family doctor and I work 100% as a physician. But I think arts is my way of expressing arts was with poetry. So when I find out about Sahiyo, like I think 4 or 5 years ago now, I don't remember, it was a relief because it was the first time I had contact with Indian women that were fighting against FGM in my community. I realized that I had been cut really late in my life. I was cut in FGM type 1 when I was 8 years. And I think it was like 15, 16. I think it's late to know that you've been cut. Since so I didn't do not so much activism until I find out about Sahiyo. And then the first time, and Maria told me that maybe I could write something about FGM and my experience. And as I always wrote about poetry, so I thought about having this like poetry. And then there was this exactly Memories of a Crime. And I think poetry for me it's like easier because I don't need to describe everything. I just describe emotions and sensations. And it was the first time I really wrote something about this. Yes, it was difficult because before, as someone, I don't, maybe Kate or Maria talk about this. It was difficult to express out loud, especially in Portugal, because I was living in Portugal. It was the sense of stigmatization, of course, if you are, because the FGM is just, I think it's the peak of the iceberg, and underneath is a lot of different and really strong system of belief and patriarchy rules. And I was fighting against that rule, being part of a diaspora, Indian diaspora in Portugal, and my family, there were no other family that was part of the community, so they were doing their best, and they thought it was the best thing to do. So I was fighting against like arranged marriage and things like that. So it was not easy growing up into different cultures. So it was then I thought when I can say that I was free from these compulsories, then I just had time to think about FGM. So and this poem, actually, it was the first poem I shared with friends, even with people, with my mother, and it was the first time I actually talked about this issue really without fear, or because I thought it expressed exactly what I wanted to say. And it's I don't want to. If you read the poem, I try not to put my mother as a like guilt, because that's not. It's the system that's behind, and so that's it. And then with this poem, actually, it was like something was open. Yeah, I just I dared to write more and more, and then I started to write more and more about. Then I had my 2 kids. I have 3 kids now. So I think, and then last year I was pregnant with the 3rd, and Maria also contacted me. It was a great time, actually, because I wanted to. It gave me the possibility to go also towards another type of. It was before, I think the slide before, the storytelling project. And I never done storytelling before, like in this format, digital version. I was pregnant of my 3rd with the person I want to be. It was when Maria told me to do this storytelling, I wanted to also tell the story of my delivery, which is also a type of patriarchy control on women. And there's so much to fight because against also the birth, how women give birth, and it's all related. In my memories, it's also the same position, lithotomy, and the lithotomy position is the position of control toward woman's body. I don't know if I had time to continue. Well, yes.
Yeah, if you're comfortable with me playing the video.
Okay, yes.
That would be wonderful. Okay.
Legs wide open, pointing to the sky, you look up to the ceiling of a hospital. Your external genitalia exposed to the open air. Others controlling, manipulated, mess with your axis. My first lithotomy, when they cut a piece of clitoris, 4 or 5 millimeters of vital tissue, having completed 8 rounds around the world, by ritual, by patriarchal order. The same position at 25, giving birth to my daughter. A white man, obstetrician, he thrust his whole hand into my vagina and brutally performed the Hamilton vaginal touch without any prior notice or consent. The escalation of pain, violence, pain, vomiting, violence, intensifying. A midwife at the Reina Sofia hospital in Cordoba was laughing at my pain, making fun of my requests, of my decision to avoid anesthesia. I was questioned because of my ethnic origins. I was invaded with irrelevant questions while contracted in pain. This white woman left me in a lithotomy position, lonely, abandoned, in that room, on that cold gurney, the same gurney of mutilation. When 2 of my own women grabbed my legs, held me down to dissect that irrelevant piece of clitoris. My delivery continued, in lithotomy, asking for help to endure the pain. I give up, and I finally asked for the epidural. That woman succeeded, abused, violated. Power abuse and racism enacted in all its splendor and impunity. I gained strength and expelled from myself my whole being. They cut part of the vaginal tissue, an episiotomy without warning, neither consent. All goes well, they say. My daughter is fine. No reason, no consent. 2 cuts in lithotomy position, looking at the ceiling, vulnerable with legs wide open, exposed. Katana, all these cuttings, prints of patriarchy, misogyny, institutional racism, woman towards woman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I didn't know, do you have anything else left of your presentation?
As Owanto says, we could talk much more.
Mhm.
And I think I'm finished now.
Of course. Yeah, thank you so much. And moving on to our next panelist, we have Andrea Carr here with us today. And she has worked across a broad spectrum of performing arts, bringing vitality to global ecological and social themes. Her eco-design remit is to repurpose objects, use surplus materials, and commit to a closed-loop design process in which all components are considered in a cyclical manner, with their afterlife as important as their current use. Embracing change along the way, her work often distills into designs that move between art installations and immersive environments. Her work has been included in the UK representation of the World Stage Design Exhibition, the Aesthetica Art Prize Anthology, and the Designers Lead section of the Society of British Theatre Designers 2019 exhibition at the V&A. Andrea is also studying process-oriented psychology. And now I'll turn it over to Ms. Carr now to give an introduction of her work.
Hello, thank you very much. Yeah, I just noticed there's a slide up about the piece. So I might just say a little bit more about my approach, and then I'll talk about the piece, if that's okay.
Of course.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me here as part of this conversation. And just to say a little bit more about my approach. So I'm, as been said, I practice as an eco designer, also called eco-sonography, and also as an artist. And one of the things that I'm doing, which relates, I think, because I'm looking at everything from the broader perspective of how we're all connected, and actually what true sustainability as a global community could look like. So my actual focus a lot of the time is to raise awareness around sustainable practices in the performing arts section. And I've been spearheading a new website called EcoStage, which helps raise awareness around placing ecological thinking at the heart of creative practice. So the reason I mention this is that I come from this perspective that many voices are needed to make change happen, and that in order to make change happen, we need to have different and varied ways to interrupt the cycling or the status quo. And I think we've already seen some incredible work by the other panelists that I believe are speaking to this point. I also believe that art can be used as a way to talk about difficult topics. So I found out about FGC or FGM, as it was called then, through Forward UK, which is an organisation that raises awareness about FGC and also about girls and women at risk of FGC. And the piece was created that I'll talk about in a bit from a call out from Forward to contribute to an exhibition which was called Traditions Run Deeper Than Laws. And we could go to the next slide. Yes, after Little Stitches. We'll just leave it there for a minute. So, so just to say that the exhibition was curated by Artists Against FGM, and it was founded by somebody called Aga Tamalua in 2014. And the exhibition was held at the Red Gallery in London, which is quite, people probably, you know, just to say a little bit about that's in the East End of London. It's quite a kind of funky area, and it was quite an alternative, but quite kind of well-known venue. And it featured 11 socially conscious international artists who were contributing to ending female genital cutting, who believe they have a social responsibility to question, comment, and take action. And it was a privilege for me to be included. And after Little Stitches, which is now up here, was displayed on the Plan UK stall as part of Women of the World Festival in 2015 at the South Bank. So this is an image of the piece. I wanted to talk a little bit about this, and then there'll be a bit of audio-visual material, and I'll talk a little bit more. So the impetus for the work takes its name from a play I went to see, which really moved me. And the play was called Little Stitches, produced by Bear Tree Theatre Company in London in 2014. And it was a set of 4 plays that looked into the human stories behind female genital cutting. So after Little Stitches, this piece, in fact, here, this the dress, which I'll talk about, it has writing on it, went on to accompany the launch of the retour of the show, and it was exhibited in the foyer. So the plays themselves explored some of the cultural and traditional background of FGC and the complexities that societies encounter when trying to eradicate it. So this piece of work connects my theatre and artwork worlds together and shows how they influence each other. So my artwork used verbatim text from one of the plays. It was called From Felicity's Story, and the title of that section was Where Do I Start? By playwright Paul Cuadras Molina. And it was drafted from interviews from FGC survivors, activists, and nurses. And the text was provided by kind permission of the producer and the author. So I'd like to move on to a short audio-visual piece that goes on to show the piece, and also there's an image. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of images from the exhibition, which is a huge shame, but the last image is of one of the survivors engaging with the artwork. So with further ado, if we could look at the little presentation, that would be lovely.
I was cut in my hometown, along with other relatives and friends. I think it was cheaper that way. They gave us presents, nothing too special, these girly, puffy dresses, because the dress got spoiled with all the blood afterwards. It was a big day. I remember counting the days down for the event. It's called Gudis. The floor was tiled. I saw the same type of floor in Spain to keep the heat off. Very beautiful. There were goods baskets, maybe picnic baskets, and there was a patio where we were playing, and we drank lemonade all day. Later on, we were afraid to pee because it burned the cut. I'm studying to work with children, but I'm scared of the things they do to them. I'll wait till I finish my degree and then I'll try for my own babies. Is there anything else you want to know?
Thank you. So the clip there, the voiceover there was a short excerpt from the monologue, and just a little about the process. So I used the text from the monologue, and I ingrained it onto a child's dress using a graphite pencil. I wanted to choose, I thought a lot all the way along about these choices, why I was choosing this type of medium, and graining it with a pencil was interesting because it was almost quite like kind of thing a child might have to hand, but also it's kind of an indelible kind of, and it smudges and has a kind of quality to it. So I guess what I did was to sort of transpose, you know, the idea of a theatre piece into a different medium to create a 3D work. And the piece itself was created to the line that was said in that little clip. They gave us presents, nothing too special, these girly puffy dresses, because the dresses got spoilt with all the blood afterwards. And I was very moved by this idea that a new dress for most little girls is usually something to cherish, to feel pretty in, to maybe, you know, play at being a princess in, or imagine some future, when you're grown up, how you might be. And I was keen that the dress be close to the age of the child when she was cut. So I chose this sort of size of dress. And I wanted people to first see the dress, this modest dress in this understated fabric. It's very quiet choice. And then to get curious, to get closer, to read or catch bits of the graphic text. And I also had on display at the time of the exhibition the full text, so that people could read as well. So I guess I wanted to juxtapose this idea of the dress, juxtapose ideas of the words telling a different story to the visual of encountering the dress. And then just to reflect on the artwork, some choices again. I wanted to present the dress hanging in space so people could walk around the dress and present it more in line with an artwork than a costume, which might be placed on a mannequin. And I was surprised how survivors and different people interacted with the work. Here's on the right, somebody behind the dress taking a picture of themselves, taking ownership in a way of the artwork, and actually kind of talking about it and engaging with it. So that I hadn't anticipated through the way that I'd chosen to display it, that people could actually kind of, you know, explore inhabiting or relating to the piece in different ways. And it was important to make a contribution that uplifted voices of survivors rather than spoke for survivors. That is why I chose to use verbatim text and thought a lot about how to go about this piece of work. And the sensitivity and awareness needed by non-survivors is very important. And I guess I wanted just to say that this relates, which has been spoken about, to the powerful healing that takes place when people's personal stories are witnessed, and how this leads to collective transformation and healing. And art has the potential to speak for itself and spark conversations. And this was my overall intention. And then just to say that there is a kind of vision where I would like to work with other people, maybe to expand out the idea, and there could be an exhibition of more dresses where people can respond to the cutting in different ways. It could be through embroidery, it could be dresses that are chosen again to do with a specific age that mutilation occurred. So there's a kind of a vision that maybe it could develop. I think that's probably really all I'd like to say. And just again to reiterate, thank you very much. It's a privilege to be part of this webinar.
Thank you so much. Alrighty. And last but certainly not least, we have Naomi Wachs with us here today. She is a clinical social worker who focuses on art-based methods, LGBTQ affirmative practice, and trauma-informed practice. As a German Chancellor Fellow with Alexander von Humboldt, she explored art-based practices as a tool for trauma and healing and restorative dialogue with immigrant and displaced communities affected by FGC and other forms of gender-based violence. And I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Ms. Wachs now.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I am so inspired and moved by the work that Sahiyo is doing and the other panelists who are on talking here with me. I'll just speak very briefly. I first learned about the practice of FGM when I was in my 20s, when I was in social work school. And I had already been studying trauma therapy and the role that art can play as a healing modality. I previously was an actor and director and singer and doing a lot of work at the intersection of theater and social justice. And I saw the potential firsthand of the role art could play in social change and activism and empowerment, but through my clinical training began to explore its therapeutic potential. And this brought me to Germany, as Kate already mentioned, where I spent 18 months interviewing activists, artists, survivors, therapists, and nonprofits about how they were using art in a variety of forms to support communities impacted by FGMC. And these interviews are currently in the process of being turned into a handbook for practitioners that explores the different roles art can play, from trauma healing to empowerment to intergenerational dialogue and education. And because trauma on an individual, relational, and community level, and I think it's really important that we talk about trauma on all those different levels, is often so central to communities who are impacted by FGMC, art can play a really crucial role, as we've seen, for survivors in their own healing, for communities, and for bringing more awareness. And maybe I can just talk for one moment about why art is so impactful with trauma, that, trauma, the way that it's processed in the body, whether it's physical trauma or relational trauma, our brain enters into this automatic survival mode, which can turn off the verbal parts of our brain. Which makes our narratives disjointed, which makes it difficult to sometimes even put language to experience. And art is a way in to be able to give voice to those experiences and begin to make sense of what has happened. So I think I'll stop there for now, but that's my little entry point into the conversation.
Yeah, and thank you all so much for those wonderful introductions and exploring your work. I think we are a little short on time. And I was wondering, maybe it looks like we have one question in the Q&A box, and I might promote him to a panelist so that he can ask his question live. 1 second.
Hello?
Hi, it looked like you asked us a couple questions in the Q&A box, and we were wondering if you wanted to ask your question to our panelists live.
Yes, I was actually starting to write another question. Hello everyone, my name is Bolu Adewale. I'm a doctoral candidate at Royal Roads University, and my research right now involves the continuation of FGM within Osun State, Nigeria. The questions I had to all of you was, do you believe that maybe during antenatal classes with the majority of these women, the discussion of FGM/FGC will be very valuable? And because I feel like, especially in a lot of rural areas where it's practiced, that in these spaces, a lot of times husbands don't really accompany their wives to antenatal classes. So there's this kind of privacy where they feel a little bit more, not vulnerable, but more open to learning and discussing more. So maybe in these areas, in the hospitals or in the local clinics, that it would be valuable to have these conversations with these pregnant women and maybe change their minds if they were having thoughts of maybe continuing the practice?
Yeah, and our speakers, feel free. Any of you can just hop in and answer that.
I would say it's more a question for Naomi, probably. Don't you
Yeah,
think?
I want to, oh, go ahead, Naomi.
Sorry.
No, you jump in, Maria, you jump in.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And I think it's a really important question. I think, it's a very specific question too. And I do think education and outreach is incredibly important. And I think just going back to this webinar, we're really talking about different ways of providing education, how you can provide openings to bring up those conversations as well. And I think just thinking about what all the panelists have chosen to speak and share about their own art and advocacy, these are options, these are ways to begin conversations. And so it's something that I do think being able to take the conversation out of that private sphere into the public is always helpful. And it's never easy having conversations, but hopefully some of what the panelists have shared can be strategies that could be used. I've actually often found sharing an article, sharing a story, sharing something can be an effective way of engaging that conversation versus sometimes directly asking. So sorry, my voice has been cracking, but I think that's just, I just wanted to bring up that point as well. But I don't know if anyone else had anything to share.
I guess just to chime in, I think, Maria, you're saying something really important, that it's not just about having a conversation, but the way in which a conversation is had, the way a topic is brought up, an invitation to explore and talk about things. And I think that art can be an entry point for a lot of people to express thoughts and feelings kind of from a roundabout way, right? And begin to explore things and the various feelings and layers of experience. And I think sometimes when things become just about education, it can feel directive, it can be distancing, and art can be a way of getting into a more exploratory mode.
Mm-hmm. And another question, sorry if I can just, how were you guys able to gain the trust of the participants that were like willingly giving their support? Because I find like in a lot of these spaces too, like that public stigma and that shamed, or, they don't really want to come out and talk, especially if they're within these communities that it's continued, it's not seen as anything bad. So to kind of come out there and be like, well, I want to talk about how this affected me negatively. How were you guys able to, first of all, get into these communities, gain their trust, and then have them to, kind of pour out their experiences to you without any type of fear of backlash of being casted out by these communities that they're still in?
I'll just start, and I recognize we're running out of time, but I do think
sorry.
No, I think it's a great question. I would love for all the panelists to talk a little bit about their own experiences, but I know from Sahiyo, one of the things is we started as a group that was connected to a community, the Bora community, and wanted to create one place where we could share our stories because we recognized these stories were just not out in the public. And that's really how we began with our own networks. Eventually, as we started sharing stories and making these public, and we always allowed people to share their stories in multiple ways, whether anonymously or with their name, with a pseudonym. We're very respectful of that because we recognize there are a lot of complexities to sharing your stories and challenges when you do amongst your own family and community. So we allowed them to do that. And again, the idea of giving them their own agency, I think, by allowing them to share their story, that helped build that trust. With our Voices project and with all of our projects, it really has been built off of that kind of initial trust and hearing about the stories. And it's had this ripple effect where as we started sharing these stories, and it would influence other people to come and be involved in various programs too. So that's all I'll say quickly, but I would love to hear from the other panelists too.
Well, I would just like to say, as a survivor of type 1 FGM, for me personally, I don't feel like traumatized of the event, the situation what happened with the FGM. I remember completely because I was 8 years old, but I always minimized because it was type 1, it was not type 3, so I was always minimizing. But what is behind this? Why do we have to go through this? Why all my cousins had to do? Why all around it? But I think my context is Indian community with the norms and rules of patriarchy. So when I got politically active in feminism and started reading books and even on anti-racism, I can say now for me it's like real liberating to talk about this. I cannot talk really openly with my family because they don't want to hear about this. But it's done. I mean, I just did it. I wrote. But I think what your question is about shame and about how people will talk is because it's not just about FGM, it's about everything else. Because when someone is going through FGM, is going through a lot of other since they were child, like patriarchy, and there are so many different type of violences. So I think that's it. It's the micro and the macro. So the micro is maybe educating, but the macro is like the eradicating the system, like this patriarchy system, one part. So.
Thank you so much, Owanto and Andrea. I don't know if you guys wanted to touch on that as well, and maybe you, Naomi.
Well, I don't know. The question is about time, but I have had requests that people wanted to listen to an extract of 1,000 voices, but it all depends on time. Because
yeah, I just want to be respectful of all of your guys' time.
Okay.
And I think we're a little past 11. So if you guys just want to finish up answering this question, and then I think we might have to end it there.
Well, I think it was very important for us to bring the art in the communities. So the first phase was to bring them to the institution, the cultural institution, because if the cultural institution worldwide are not involved, those survivors might not feel that changing the cultural, the tradition into modernity would not. I mean, we have to support at completely different levels. So yes, the bridge between the photography as well and the voices, because many people thought in Africa that FGM was only in Africa. Then we came with knowing that it was FGC, and that was a surprise to me. I didn't know that it existed in India. And then when we were hearing the voices in a school in Nigeria, well, we were so surprised and happy in a way to see that the people were connecting with all the other part of the world, with survivors, and they didn't feel they were alone. So all those things we are doing, and everybody will do, is just to push the boat in the right direction to eradicate FGM-C, which I didn't say it at the beginning.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me and for having us.
I could add one other element or perspective, just that it seems vital to create safe space and to understand very clearly what that is, that it requires continuous choices being offered to people. It cannot replicate the same structural oppressions, structural discriminations that all of this is embedded in. And so if I just draw a little bit on some of the training I'm doing, I'm a student in process-oriented psychology. We have a lot of emphasis on slowing down and on not leaving people alone. The idea that that people have a personal story to share, but it's also representing a role, and it also connects to a collective issue. So we like to see it from that perspective, that somebody is also holding a role, and by sharing their own personal story, it is a healing of the field. The whole field is affected. So I just wanted to bring in a little bit of that perspective. And of course, art can be if it's well held and it is respectful, can be one of these, like a medium by which people can feel safe to talk about difficult topics and be held.
Of course, thank you so much. Alrighty, and I didn't know if you guys had any last things. Again, I want to be respectful of your time. And for some of our unanswered questions, we do typically a follow-up email where we'll try to get to those. We'll post the recording of this webinar so that people can see. And of course, I want to give such a big thank you to our panelists today for joining us and their time and effort fighting for championing this cause. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Alrighty, I'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you so much to our guests as well.